Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right into it. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey through the architecture of security. We're going to trace the path of secure system design, starting from the very foundation, a developer's local code environment, all the way up the stack to massive broad cloud infrastructure. We'll be exploring how the choices you make at the micro level, like your basic code structure, actually ripple out and impact the macro level, like your data vaults and network requests.
To kick things off, let me ask you this. What do bad code abstractions, dinosaurs with laser guns, and leaky cloud buckets all have in common? I know, it sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, right? But the truth is, they all represent critical points of failure across the entire spectrum of system security. As we'll see today, security isn't just about throwing up a firewall. It's a continuous chain of decisions. A single weak link, whether that's how you define a simple variable or how you configure a massive data storage system, can literally bring the whole fortress crashing down.
So, to build our secure fortress from the ground up, we're going to hit 5 key areas. First up, code design. Then we'll tackle cryptography, Fernet, securing your S3 vault, and finally, authenticating AWS requests.
All right, Section 1, Code Design Primitive Obsession.
Look, before we can even think about encrypting data or locking down cloud servers, we've got to make sure our basic blueprints are solid. And that brings us to a concept highlighted by Mark Needham called primitive obsession. It's basically the practice of describing high-level, complex domain concepts with low-level primitive types. Think about it like using a standard string to represent an email address, or just a generic integer for a highly specific system ID. When you do that, you're completely bypassing any structural domain-level validation. You end up having to write all this tangled, custom logic just to make those generic primitives fit your specific needs. It creates conceptual duplication, and honestly, it makes the code incredibly difficult to secure and evolve because your basic building blocks can't even defend themselves against bad data.
Dave Cameron really hit the nail on the head here. He warns that, quote, eliminating duplication by introducing a mediocre abstraction leads to pain. And he's absolutely right. Squeezing out duplication by packaging things up in an awkward, mediocre way actually obscures the more elegant solutions you're going to need later on. That short-term benefit of writing slightly less code today? Yeah, that just leads to the long-term pain of a fragile, hard-to-secure system tomorrow. Your blueprints need solid, purpose-built materials, not just generic duct tape.
Moving on to Section 2, Cryptography. Here be dragons.
Okay, so if you thought I was kidding about the dinosaurs earlier, well, check out this actual warning from the official cryptography documentation regarding their hazardous materials module. They explicitly tell developers that unless you are 100% absolutely sure of what you're doing, do not touch it, because it is full of landmines, dragons, and dinosaurs with laser guns. No way, right? But they use this extreme kind of playful humor to make a deadly serious point. Symmetric encryption alone only provides secrecy, not authenticity. If an attacker can't read your message, but they can manipulate it and trick your application into decrypting a bogus message, your system is completely compromised.
So it really boils down to picking the right cryptographic nodes. You've got your strong, authenticated modes like GCM, which actually authenticates the message right while it's encrypting it, or CBC when it's paired with proper padding. Those provide a robust defense. But on the flip side, you have legacy modes like ECB or Electronic Codebook, which are just incredibly dangerous. ECB encrypts identical plaintext blocks into identical ciphertext blocks. That means if you encrypt an image using ECB, the visual patterns are often still completely visible in the encrypted output. And similarly, ARC4 is a stream cipher with serious initial stream weaknesses. Using these insecure modes is honestly like building a vault door out of clear glass.
Which brings us to Section 3, Fernet, Safe Symmetric Encryption.
So how exactly do we tame those laser-toting dinosaurs? Enter Fernet. Fernet elegantly constructs a secure token without making us manually piece together all those AES ciphers and hashing algorithms ourselves. A Fernet token is URL safe and base64 encoded. And if we break down its anatomy, it contains a 1-byte version, an 8-byte timestamp, which is huge for enforcing expiration limits, a 16-byte initialization vector, the variable length ciphertext that's encrypted using AES 128 in CBC mode, and crucially, a 32-byte HMAC signature using SHA-256. This specific combination is often called encrypt then MAC, and it's a total game changer. It guarantees both privacy and authenticity. Basically, the data can't be read, and it can't be tampered with unless you have the secret key.
But hey, things happen, right? An employee leaves, or maybe you suspect a key might be compromised. You've got to rotate your keys.
Thankfully, the cryptography library offers a tool called Multi-for-Net that makes key rotation a simple three-step process. First, you generate a new key and toss it right at the front of your active key list, so all new data uses the strongest key. Second, you rotate your old tokens. Multi-for-Net actually decrypts them using the old keys in the list and immediately re-encrypts them with the primary new key. Finally, once everything is rotated, you just retire that old key. It's a remarkably seamless way to limit damage and maintain a secure vault over time.
All right, Section 4, Securing your S3 Vault.
Okay, so our code is clean and our data is safely encrypted. Now let's zoom out to the cloud infrastructure layer. Where does all this encrypted data actually live? Well, for many of us, it lives in AWS S3 buckets. These are basically the massive fortress walls of our system. The Cloud Security Alliance outlines some absolutely crucial cloud security posture management, or CSPM, practices to make sure these don't become leaky buckets. Let's rapid fire through the essentials. You absolutely must block public access, so buckets aren't open to the internet by default. You need to enable logging to track exactly who is poking around your data and when. You've got to enforce versioning, which acts like a magical undo button against accidental or malicious overwrites. And you must enable default encryption, using tools like AWS Key Management Service so that data at rest requires authorized decryption.
And on that note, the Cloud Security Alliance is incredibly explicit when it comes to access control lists. Avoid public read or public read-write ACLs unless explicitly required. Seriously, misconfigured permissions are literally one of the fastest ways to end up in the news for a massive data breach. A single overly permissive ACL can instantly bypass all your brilliant code design and cryptographic efforts, exposing your most sensitive vault data directly to unauthorized actors on the open web.
And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Authenticating AWS Requests.
We are finally at the outermost perimeter of our secure system. You have an impenetrable vault, but how do authorized applications actually get inside? We have to look at the strict guards standing at our fortress gate. AWS uses highly specific signature protocols called SIG-v4 and SIG-v4a to authenticate requests to its services. These aren't just simple passwords, they're complex mathematical calculations that take the HTTP host, the URL, and the actual payload of the request and use your secret AWS credentials to generate a unique authorization hash. Doing this manually in your code for every single network request, trust me, it's tedious and super error-prone. And that is exactly where a network proxy like the Envoy AWS request signing filter comes in. It sits right between your application and AWS, automatically modifying HTTP headers to inject those perfectly calculated SIG-v4 authorizations. It ensures only mathematically verified requests can pass through.
But wait, how does Envoy actually know what your secret AWS credentials are to calculate that signature in the first place? Well, Envoy uses a brilliantly structured credential provider fallback chain. It moves down a strict list until it finds valid keys. First, it checks for inline credentials provided directly in the config. If it doesn't find any, it checks environment variables. Then it looks for an AWS credentials file on the system. If still nothing, it tries an assume role process via the security token service. And finally, it falls back to grabbing credentials directly from the EC2 instance or ECS container metadata. This structured fallback means your secure system can smoothly transition from testing on a developer's local laptop straight into a massive production container environment, and you won't have to rewrite a single line of authentication code.
Wow, okay. We have covered a lot of ground today. We journeyed all the way from untangling primitive types in local code, straight through the hazardous dragon-filled lands of cryptography, and out into S3 bucket permissions and Envoy proxy request signing. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Your code might be perfectly clean, but is your cloud fortress actually secure? Security isn't just checking a box, you know? It's an unbroken chain of intentional, structured decisions from the very bottom to the very top. Take a look at your own stack this week and see if you have any dinosaurs lurking in your modules or any leaky walls in your vault. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.